And we are live. Welcome, everybody, to Bigfoot Odyssey's The Late Show. I'm Bradley, and we have an awesome guest tonight that you guys know about, Mark Zaskey with Crypto Reality on Patreon. How are you doing today, Mark?
Good, man. What's going on, Brad? It's good to be here.
Oh, it seems like this week has gone by so fast. Been extremely busy. How about you?
Yeah, same thing, man. The week flew by,
Well, that's always a good thing. And real quick, I want to let everybody know to keep it clean. This is a family show, and we have great moderators who will bounce your butt out of here if you get out of line. And so we appreciate that very much. And so one thing that I've always been kind of curious about is how you got to your style of filming. Because on the expedition, I watched how you did stuff, and it seems it's unique in that you really double, triple, quadruple verify what you're filming. I mean, you almost try to debunk what you're trying to get.
Yeah.
So my question is, how did you get that style?
Well, I mean, I think it's obviously necessary if you're going to be in the bush filming that you double check. If you're picking up on something that seems like the right stuff. With Melanie and I, we've had an advantage from the beginning. We went right into the area where I saw the thing, so there was no question that they exist, and there's no question the thing is here somewhere. In the beginning, our setbacks were we didn't understand that because the one that I saw exists, that there's a lot of them, and
right.
And so that was the major discovery in the beginning when we started finding tracks. It really started to show us that these things are here, and we're looking around and we don't see them, right? So
right,
like, okay, well, I saw this thing jump the trail. He came out of a bunch of bushes that were real thick and flew across the trail, and then when I turned to yell to my partner, my hiking companion, and looked back, he had gone back into the bushes. So I had pretty much everything I needed to know about where to look for the damn thing because it came out of the bushes and went back in the bushes. So I started looking in the bushes, and Melanie and I spent a great deal of time in 2015 looking in the bushes, and we covered a lot of ground, and that's how the whole thing started to develop with the way I shoot now, and then how I double check is a necessity because I shoot long distance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Boots on the ground is always going to be a necessity, but when you shoot long distance and double checking what you shoot, what you have to do, right? I mean, the last thing that I want to do is, try to put out something that's not actually valid evidence. That's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to confirm as we go. And so we spend a lot of time doing that. We shoot most of the time the same areas repeatedly, sometimes 50 to 70 times in one single expedition. And the subjects that we study have a tendency to only appear in maybe one or two of those clips out of the 60 or 70. So what we have is visual confirmation all along that the subjects are not there, and then suddenly the subjects are there, and then suddenly the subjects are not there anymore. What appears is primate. That's typically what it is. Then the boots on the ground stuff is the confirmation. But the reasoning behind this is you want to be sure about the data that you present to people so that they can view what is actually going on and not what you think is going on. What you think is going on is in your head, not in reality. And so to confirm reality is the objective of all science, right? Through options and proper procedures and protocols. And in doing that, you have to implement some of that stuff if you're going to be shooting footage, especially long distance. If you're pointing your camera in the areas that these guys typically like to stay in, it's the lower temperatures. So you're always going to get those low light situations. I highly recommend learning how to use your camera's settings so that you can eliminate shadow beforehand as much as possible without overexposing. And then learning how to manipulate the light sources and the coloration of the film in the editor itself is beneficial to remove shadow so that you can actually see what's in those areas. We don't have to rely on guessing what's in a shadow anymore. It's easily removed.
Right. Well, and I think, and when I was watching you film during the expedition, I found it fascinating that, and kind of what you were talking about just now, the area that you concentrate on, so you almost know every bush, every tree limb, what's supposed to be there by going to that same area so much once you find them. So, nobody can come out and say, oh, how do you know that's really one? Or, that could be pareidolia or whatnot. And
you're going to always get that, though. The bottom line is a human being's propensity to comment without investigation in the first place is like automatic, right? We're all on these auto responses nowadays, especially when it comes to the subject. And what I suggest is that you take some time before you comment and you listen to what's going on. Take more than 5 minutes to investigate, because the reality is like a lot of people around the country have these things either on their property or in an area that they're trying to get into, or they are studying these creatures. It's exceptionally difficult to capture them on film until you slow down and really it's a speed and an awareness that it requires that you remove yourself from what your normal state of mind would be. What I would say is this, right? If you'd like to know what Bigfoot research really is like, if you have a backyard at your house right now and it's dark, or even if it's daylight, if you look out in that grass, try to understand, and you don't have to imagine this, try to understand that the reality of what's in that grass is unknown to you. And yet there's an entire biological and ecological system in that grass with thousands of dramas playing out between insects and mammals and all kinds of stuff. And you don't see it because you're busy about your life. But if you take the time to get a camera and crawl around on your backyard and you really start zooming in, you're going to start seeing what lives in that grass. That's what crypto reality has done in the swamps of South Florida. The same exact thing. We started crawling around in there and zooming in. And one of the things that we like to illustrate as like a starting point for understanding our research is that, first of all, we're researching in an area where we've seen these things. Eyeballs, right? We got eyeballs on them. So we know they're real. We know they're in this area. The other aspect of what we do that's really so important is we go in the same area. And so what we have a tendency to do is capture the same individuals on film.
Right.
When you start to see the same individuals hundreds of yards apart, but yet in the same area, and you're learning to recognize the individuals, because after 5 years and 500 or 600 expeditions at this point, you've captured them dozens of times, the same individuals. It gets a lot easier in the confirming of what's going on. You can plainly see 6 or 7 shots in a montage that we post on Patreon of the same individuals. Am I correct, Bradley?
Oh no, you totally are, and that's the one thing that I really enjoy about your site is, especially before the expedition, when I really went to understand you better, because I knew you from interviews and whatnot, but since I knew you were going to be filming and you were going to be directing us in which way to go, I wanted to try to learn, how you presented things and your logic and how you presented things. And that's when, I noticed, and it occurred to me that you just don't, if you see something, you just don't put it up immediately. You double and triple check it just so everybody can know that this is not the wind blowing and something just forms the right way and it looks like one. Every branch and every, basically every blade of grass in your research areas. So that made it really exciting for me when I got to meet you and when I watched you start filming and stuff, that your area. It's not like you go here one day, here another day, and you focus. When you find them, you focus on that area until it almost till it gives out, or till you want to give them a break, or do the apples or do whatnot. And so I highly suggest everybody that's watching this, you got to check out his site on Patreon. It's not very much at all. What is it? $5 a month?
$1.99 a month.
Yeah, and it's, if you're questionable, or if you want to learn how to research or just see a different style, You know, it's really cool to learn, and so I was really excited when I met you just to kind of see how you did it, and you
Well, you
did
know,
it.
hey, listen, the reality of what we do now is a direct result of doing it 1,000 different ways and then coming to the conclusion that this is the best way to capture the evidence that we really want. First and foremost, are they in there? We got to get them. We got if you can't see them right then you got to get in there somehow and get close, because the reality of dealing with these guys is that they really try to maintain a visual and spatial distance from you and
Right.
still observe you. So let's say there's an individual in the field 60 yards from Melanie and I move up 10 yards as quiet as I can. Invariably, we hear the individual move back 10 to 20 yards.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, like these dudes, they'll hear you and they'll start backing up. So everywhere you go, there's this gap. To close the gap, we got tired. It just the economy of motion, man. This is
Yeah.
Florida. It's 100 degrees. It's 100% humidity. We're dying chasing these things in the bushes for 3 years straight. And so finally I said, you know, the only way I'm going to close this gap, it can't be closed physically. And yeah, we can sneak on them sometimes and catch them, you know, sleeping, or every, you know, broken clock is right twice a day and things make, you know, mistakes. And
Blind squirrel. Yeah.
Mistakes. They do make mistakes. They'll sleep somewhere and they'll oversleep, and we've caught them in the morning and they've gotten up and run off. And we've had a lot of situations. But in the end, to close the gap, I figured that the camera and manual, just good camera skills was going to win the day. And I was right, man. In the end of the day, we're getting closer with the cameras. But the reality is that the cameras that we have with our technology could only get us so close before we had to begin explaining what we were seeing.
Mm-hmm.
And in the end, I was seeing green. I was seeing green hair and green skin and green and various shades of green, dark green and light green. So yeah, if you go to Patreon, you'll see we've pretty much explained what's going on. When I started seeing these green things in the bushes, I was like, okay, let's go see if there's a green thing in the bushes. And we went over there, there's nothing there. But we did find tracks and hair where we caught them on film. And so we have that, you know what I mean? And we've done that a dozen times, man, where we filmed them and then went in Central Florida in particular, in the exact same spot next to the exact same tree, pulled hairs out and have done comparisons. And you can see all of this evidence in our volumes on either cryptoreality.us or Patreon.
All right. Let me ask you this: when did you guys decide to start with the apples? Because it seems like that's really been a home run for you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Melanie was adamant that if I didn't stop, they were going to kill me. And so I was like, okay, well, let's, you know, a couple of incidents, and, you know, you get a 25-pound rock flying 40 or 50 feet from a tree line into the water, landing by you will start you thinking, you know. And so I stopped being aggressive, and Melanie said, let's bring him some food. And I was like, all right. So we started to try various things, and they didn't really like any of the stuff we brought, but I started to look around and I realized, man, none of this stuff is native. So let's look for something that's native and then find a better version of it. So we started looking at what was in the swamp, and we saw some banana trees, I think they were plantains, and some swamp apples. So we went with that, and it turns out, yeah, apples are, they love apples, man. And even down here, even though they're not privy to the red ones, they took to the red apples like it was crazy, because the ones down here in the swamp are green. So.
Well, didn't they almost start getting twisted off at you guys if you went out without apples, or if you forgot them? I mean, that's got to be kind of like a...
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've had rocks thrown at us if we didn't give them. Sometimes, and that's the thing, right? Because once we got them to the point where they were reacting when we got there, we knew that if we introduced, you know, stimulus in the experiment by denying the reward, we would get reactions and be able to record as well. And so the entire situation has been manipulated from the very beginning in every direction you can possibly manipulate it in experimentation with these apples and with the peanut butter and the DNA traps and all that stuff. And successfully, we've collected all of the physical evidence that we need to conclusively show that the species is real.
Now, how many places have you done the Pavlov's dog theory with the apples in your research. Did you ever find, if y'all were focusing on one area and then wanted to go to another spot and check it out, that some of those were expecting apples at all?
Well,
It's kind of a random question, but
yeah, I mean, it's a good question. We have a spot that Melanie and I cultivated. They respond really well to Melanie's voice, and so we've rode that in the experimentation. So that spot, if we go there, it's like, go ahead, Mel, do your thing, and she'll call them, and they respond, man. When they hear what she says, they sticks and branches and trees are, we got people who've been in with us and have seen all this and heard all this, but in the end, not all spots are like that. We didn't choose to do that in another area that's very active where we took the 168 crew. We didn't do a lot of that out there. We didn't have to. When we walked in the area, it was where I saw the Sasquatch, and we were finding 18 and 20-inch tracks, and then hundreds of tracks from the juveniles and even the toddler that they have out there. We've been finding trackways with hundreds of their tracks for 6 years.
Was that the area that I got left at?
That was the area that you mistakenly left there. Yes. Oh, yeah, but actually, you weren't left there. You just had a bumpy ride. That's all.
Right. I got back, and it was you got to take the positive. I did get back
in Dukes of Hazzard style.
Yes, and there's nothing like. Say, what did Mel say?
He said a story to be told for years to come.
Yes, I mean, there's nothing like hearing it
happen, because it's something that's memorable that you get to keep telling.
So that's right.
Yes. That's the first time I ever heard a turbo kick in at the wrong time on a diesel truck.
Yeah, right.
I mean, that was just so ominous, and it was just like, oh no. But anyway, I diverge. But just FYI, everyone in the chat, if any questions for Mark or Mel, put them in all caps, and we'll try to get some of those. I know that we're on a time constraint tonight. We only have an hour to give you of Mark and Sweet Mel. So, based on how we did the 168 that we just filmed, are there any other type of filming theories or that you want to try on the new one, or is it, what do you think?
No, I look at it like, we've been able to conclusively show, to the extent that we're capturing what we capture on film, repetitively, and that's right. That's something right there, right? So we know how to find them, and we know what's going on during these interactions. We know exactly how they're using the environment to observe us, because we've checked the areas subsequently from capturing them on film and searched for the hair and the tracks and found all that, right? So we can see how they manipulate the environment because we stood in their shoes, so to speak, in their feet, so to speak.
Right.
And we're looking out at the spots where we stand and film, right? So we know what's going on. We know exactly how they're doing things. And in looking at everything that goes on and everything that has gone on with crypto reality, and then the other stuff that is 168, it's still in that rush-in phase, and trying to confirm something in active shooting mode is one thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I look at, like, I had a strong inclination that the data that we have from other camping areas in the state of Florida would ring true here, and based on the data that we got visually, and the tracks that we got, and the fact that we had audio that's still coming from the tree line, where I actually filmed what I'm telling you is hominoids. We have confirmation from several different sources on that, right? We have the audio from the tree line from several different audio recorders. We have my visual evidence from the same tree line the audio recorders were sitting in. We have eyewitnesses of the thermal encounters on the first or second night when I was there. Several eyewitnesses with thermals saw those individuals in the trees. I mean, this is like, so in looking at it, what do we do? What are we going to do differently? If anything, if I had total control over the situation, which I'm not saying and by any means I would try to enforce, or I'm going to try to do any of that. If it was my say-so on what happened, nobody would be going in the tree line. Not until we identified that subjects were in the tree line, and that takes time. And there's a very specific idea that I had to use the technology that Carrie and I have been talking about for a while to force the individuals that are observing us out of the tree line so that the drones can then pick them up from above. And in looking at that situation, boots on the ground has to be done at the right time, and it should be coordinated properly. So in looking at these situations, the last time when we had that thermal situation, we could have done better. We needed a guy recording with a thermal the entire time while the team moved in, and we didn't have that. That's where we went wrong. So there were some little follies here and there in the process that ended up, costing us. We blew opportunities. There's some, So this time I plan to monitor those types of situations in real time a little bit, more intensely and try to guide them a little bit better. We are better prepared. Last time I was working all day and then, going to see you guys
right.
So I was like burning the candle at both ends.
Spent, yeah.
Yeah. And I was ate up, man. I was ate up. And so, I'm doing the best I can, with the whole thing, but I really think we did a good job. And I think that this time, I don't think much is going to change because I like the way we had groups traveling from area to area. And I think a lot of people, I think Kerry in particular has a really good idea of what he wants to do in that campsite where they had the fake campsite set up now. My thing is, really specific areas with very specific techniques that are going to require, like surgical accuracy with cameras to get into very specific holes, and do very specific things at exactly the right moments. And so orchestrating all of these things this time is what I'll be focusing on. We'll see if it makes a big difference. Honestly, with the activity I saw at the campground, the first couple of nights, and the fact that we were casting tracks pretty much the first night, I mean, it's like ridiculous.
Yeah, and that was a good shot. So yeah, and that first night, I had the where I know what I saw, but it was something that we weren't able to film. Chris Noel was trying to film it, and I had one that was blinking in coordination with the lightning bugs. And with that old time, you remember the night vision that I had that was the old military with the tubes? And it took like 10 to 15, 20 minutes to warm up. It's interesting, and I'll kind of segue off of this. One of the things that I learned personally is we all really need to know our equipment extremely well, because I did not know my equipment, and that was one thing that I thought about when I was driving back to Dallas was I should have known how to operate that thing front and back, sideways, underwater, in the dark. I should have known it better. And I think that that's one of the things when we're going into the next expedition that I'm going to, talk about, just because, my own, and I don't want to say failure, but I just didn't know my equipment as well as I should have been, because I was watching you, and you knew every part of what that camera would do, and the same with Carrie. But to segue back, the one thing that was interesting in the night vision, going from night vision to thermal, is obviously what it picks up and what it doesn't. But then also with the thermal, you tend to think that you're going to get a perfect silhouette with the thermal, and a lot of times you get just kind of a mass. Pardon me, depending on how accurate or how advanced your thermal is versus. And I don't want to knock FLIR or anything, because I think they're good. But when you take a FLIR versus a high-end, $6,000 thermal, it's night and day difference.
Yeah.
So, do you work with thermals much at all, or?
Sure. Yeah. We have a great thermal. It was donated to us by Scotty H. And it's a good one, man. I have it. You can set it to your different color schemes,
right?
To where it's like a bright green thermal signature. So everything is like black and dark green, and then there's bright green when there's a heat signature. Florida's like a little different when you use thermal here. A lot of times the environment, if you're shooting close to sundown or close to the daytime, or in the daytime, or like just after dusk, really all the way up until about 2:30 to 3 o'clock in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
The forest and the ground holds a lot of ambient heat, and the trees especially too. So when you're filming, you can be shooting in an area where there are Sasquatch, and there could be a Sasquatch sitting right there up against a tree, but he's lit up the same color as the tree. And so unless you understand what shoulders look like in the form of a Sasquatch, you'd never even see him. And if there's bushes in front of his chest, you're not going to see the shoulders probably, because you got the tops of bushes. So what you have is a head in front of a tree, very much like the tree behind my head.
Right.
Except they blend in, even at night, on a thermal, because they're lit up hot, and so is the tree. So if you're going to use the thermal, there are some really specific situations that you need to use it in to get the most out of the footage that you're actually going to, get off of it. If you're in an area that's very hot in the daytime, right? Like South Florida, it's ridiculous using a thermal down here. You can do it. The best time is from 3 to 6 a.m. If you use a thermal and you're looking for Sasquatch with a thermal, those are the times in Florida that I recommend using it, 3 to 6 a.m. It also happens to be what our data suggests is the time that they're most active in, say, camping areas and so on.
Well, see, that makes all the sense in the world, because the thermals, and I can't even remember the brand that I had that I would hunt with, that was on my AR when we would pig hunt at nighttime. It's night and day different from, I would always pig hunt in the wintertime or during deer season, or on this ranch we were on, it was a game management. So we hunted basically, deer from October through the end of February. And when you're looking in the field, looking at hogs, that was my baseline, that all I knew about was that's what it looked like. So then getting the thermal in Florida, everything was totally different. And so I had a hard time trying to figure out what was what.
Well, that's the thing. If you're in Florida and you're on a thermal, it's like you really need to know. It's like the old puzzle, what doesn't belong.
Right.
You really need to be good at what doesn't belong in a thermal setting. So you need to know your environment and what shapes, the natural shapes in your environment. It's like after 5.5 years, I can tell you that there are shapes and colors in the forest that, yes, they belong, but they're on a Sasquatch, and they're only on a Sasquatch, these shapes and colors, right? And so it's the shapes, and you'll see it, like you're typically not going to see a 90 most situations in the forest, right? Especially if it's like fuzzy and it looks like, it's got a little muscle on it and there's some hair sticking off it, probably a shoulder. You know what I mean? And in the thermal, you're looking at this, and then you start looking for the right parts that are supposed to be connected to it. So thermal is very difficult in Florida. If you're in open ground, like you said, I can identify hogs all day long, man. They're not trying to hide from me, man. You know what I mean? In the end, we're dealing with a self-aware hominid, man. So they first of all, they display a great deal of indifference to whatever we are on,
right?
And then we have the aspects of, I need to survive, so I got to be quiet and I got to be stealthy, or the hogs are just going to run off and I'm not going to ever see a deer because I'm over here jabbering. You know what I mean? So all that, they got to sit still, they got to watch.
And I'll just do it for instance and I'll call where I could have been prepared better, but I thought I was prepared from a hunting background, but then getting in Florida, when one of the last nights I was there, when we went into the area where we happened to see the lights, one thing that Mark Newville talked about, he was like, since I had a thermal and he had the thermal, he was like, check our six, check behind us. And so what I would scan, and I would see the trees, I would see a thermal hit in front of a tree, but it wasn't like how when you see a hog in the field in December in Texas, you could tell it was a hog. I just saw like a mass, and then I would scan past it and then go back and it would be gone. And so that kind of action was happening around there. And from me not knowing not doing a good job of homework before I came, not knowing how that thermal would react in that certain situation, I just had a tough time, reading it and understanding what it was telling me. And so that was one thing, and that's on my list that before when we go next time is, everybody, you got to know your equipment, and you got to, because I was excited because I had something new that I just out of the box, loaded the batteries in Florida. So I had no idea how it was going to work. And it's kind of like, it's almost like beginner's luck if you're at a craps table or whatever. It was maddening because I couldn't read it.
Yeah.
So I think that is so important. And that's, one reason that we have to know our equipment and be really prepared. But, from that standpoint, we're going to have more cameras, better drones. What do you think, temperature-wise, from when we were there last time to when we're going there in the fall? Will the temperature still kind of be the same, or what do you suggest to learn how to use your thermal better? Because I can't make the same situation in Texas like I did in Florida. I'm thinking about homework before we go.
Yeah, I mean, I would just, it's typically still warm in November.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's like everybody pictures November and they start thinking Thanksgiving, and then they see, football and sometimes snow and this and that. And it's just not that way here in South Florida. So in the end, remember, Miami plays here. And so it's hot, man. You know what I mean? And it may be hot. It may be 90s. You never know. So it could go that route, and it makes thermal more difficult. The good thing about the situation that we're in where thermal is concerned is that they do like to use the trees. And that was where we saw them during the winter state. We saw them up in the trees. If you have trouble observing through really thick bush, they're going to have trouble if they're trying to observe through thick bush. So they got to do something. You know what I mean? Right. Whatever you would have to do, they're going to have to do the same thing, man. It's just they're bigger. You know what I mean? So I look at the whole thing, and it's like adjustments in real time. I think we did a really good job on that, actually, because I had, we had guys going out this way, that way, and people with thermals, and we had this and that going on. I think that November will probably be better for thermals. Yeah. But in the end, it's the use of the thermals specifically, right? So like we had an individual on a branch, and there was no doubt about that. I watched him go from a squatting position to a laying on the branch, hugging the branch position. Mm-hmm. And the drone was hovering above him, but it was difficult for us because we had issues with no gimbal. So the camera had to be positioned in a certain way before the drone even took off. So these are little limitations, but in the end, had that camera been on a gimbal, or had it been on the bottom of a Phantom with the control on it of the camera, we possibly could have caught that individual if it was thermal, right? Because he was hugging the branch, and I was watching him. You know what I mean? I made my way out there. We all made our way out there. In the interim, no one filming the entire incident is where we went wrong. They came down out of that tree as we approached. And there is no doubt about that, because I personally saw the individual, and 2 other people saw that individual through thermals on that branch. So in the end, it was confirmed by at least 3 individuals, and probably more, because there were 6 or 7 people milling around looking through the thermals, because everybody was freaking out about something actually that big being up in a tree. Right. It was the size of a man. It was like, it was probably the size of a really big, I said it was like a size of a small bear, like a black bear. That's what I would say, a black bear. It was the size of a black bear. But it wasn't a black bear. Right. It had shoulders, man. I mean, like perfectly square shoulders, and there was a little hump in the middle, like you could see just a little apex, as if there was no neck. I mean, it was like a no-brainer. Yeah. And many people were witnessing it while it was happening. It was like, I kept saying to myself, well, finally, I don't have to go home saying, hey, honey, you're not going to believe what I saw. You know what I mean? Like everybody else was going, oh, my God, I can't believe we're seeing this. You know what I mean? So no, it was really cool. That was really cool. The deal is this, Bradley, right? Like you have all those people that had all of these incredible experiences over a 7-day period in various spots that Melanie and I have spent all this time, right? We know where the clans are. We put you guys right where the clans are. You guys had stuff thrown at you, yelled, all kinds of stuff happened, running across trails and on camera. Craziness galore. In the end, we're going to do it better when November comes.
And see, and that's actually
Watch.
what makes it so exciting is because we had great experiences. Some we were able to catch on film, some we weren't, but they all led to okay, the next one is going to be so much better because we're going to do this, we're going to do this. We learned our lessons, and as long as we can keep having that, that's what makes this just so exciting. And it's if we can bring awareness from our awareness on how we're trying to do it better, but at the same time, when there is something questionable, we're not going to put it out there unless it is, when we try to quote unquote debunk it, and we can't. And I think
that's the thing, right? Like we go through all of these pains, and this is something that it's going to take someone experienced to go through these trials and tribulations that I'm about to lay out here for you. Okay. In the beginning, you get into this and you have this idea that this is the way it needs to be done, so that this is credibility and this is that, and you establish and you do all these things. And then you realize after all of it's done that every individual that reviews your work has to come to that same conclusion. And so you have however many perspectives on your work, and those people weren't there, and those people don't know, and those people have preclusions about all of this. And so regardless of your credibility and regardless of the veracity of your evidence and the forensic nature of how it was collected, you will run into this situation over and over and over again. And so, where we're at is we can lead a horse to water, but it's up to you to drink it. You know what I mean? Like, here's the truth of what's in our films. Here's the truth of what we found. Here is, the examinations of all of it. You can break this down. You can compare individuals. There's enough evidence. If somebody's interested in whether this is real or not, they can walk away from it and say, man, these guys did it. This is a done deal. You know what I mean? And for a lot of people who've been involved with crypto reality, that's the case. But there's, billions of people on planet Earth. And this is the problem that we run into. It doesn't matter that Ralph understands that Sasquatch is real, because 6,000 other Ralphs in the same city don't even know that the evidence exists. And so we're always running into this. And so what really is it that we're dealing with here? What is it that we're dealing when we talk about validation of evidence? What is it that we're doing? How does this whole thing work? It has to be a movement, and it has to continue to build. And in the end,
right.
Yes, because in the end, it can't just be so-and-so asking for an evaluation and then one person is saying, oh yes, it's approved, because so-and-so is the only one who asked for validation of this evidence, and so-and-so is the only one who approved it. So what really happens here? What is science? How are we going to do this? What's going on? These are the questions that are all going to start being addressed in this situation, because the bottom line is this could, if things aren't done differently, what's done differently?
Well,
you understand what I'm saying, right?
I totally get what you're saying, and part of what goes with that.
How many tracks does Meldrum have?
Oh shit, I don't even know.
How much hair has been tested? I mean, geez, man, you know what? We got all this stuff. How much DNA? They got DNA in GenBank right now.
Right.
Hominoid from Ketchum. They got it classified and everything. There's a type specimen to compare to. Is that the beginning? Is that where it starts? Is that how it starts to collect? You know what I mean? Because we all have to, take a really long, hard look at the resistance to this subject and the fact that mainstream scientists are policing each other over it, refusing to talk about hominology as a biological subject, instead archaeologically only conversing about the subject, which is ridiculous. It's disrespectful to eyewitnesses for you not to acknowledge the fact that hundreds of people every year are venturing into areas that these things would be existing in and seeing them and then coming back and saying it. And so this is the stuff that I'm concerning myself with that now. I look at all of that now. The research stuff, like we have enough data now, and I know my areas where I can go there. And here's the thing. We haven't found that, you had mentioned something earlier that, you work an area until it's dry or whatever. We haven't had that problem. There's not a lot of room down here for them to go. So they're staying where they're at. And where we found them, consistently, we go back and they're still there. And we know that because we're catching the same ones, right? So how can we be the only ones that know this? We've got biologists, man, that are working these areas. You going to tell me these people don't know? We just happen to show up on an arbitrary day, 365 days in a year, on an arbitrary day, and walk into that creek bed, and there was a 17-inch track right there in the middle. And
it just happenstance, right?
It just happened to be there. So a biologist would never find a track, and you're like, give me a break, man. These people know what's going on. So what has to happen, really? And these are the conversations that I'm interested in having with people at the 168 next time. Because what I want to do is I want to build a political organization that's completely legal based. And I want to handle the Sasquatch issue from a sense of legality.
Well,
and I think seriously, not with some joke bullshit. I'm talking about really handle it.
Well, and I think part of what the 168 is doing is when people watch this, and for the next one and the next ones, we're getting more consistent, and it's like we're trial by error building a baseline model of how we're approaching this. Now, wouldn't it be great if we got the next Patty, but that's not what we're going for. Even though that would be great, it's bringing a coordinated awareness based on how we're looking at this. Each one we're figuring out how to tighten it up a little bit more, where people also, they're going to watch the 168. It's basically, in a lot of instances, going to be the same players that are doing this. And, we have people from all across the U.S. that are coming together on their own dime to, basically donate 7 to 10 days of their work time into this awareness movement. And that's what excites me is like, and it all ties into what you're saying, how you want to see it play out. The more awareness, the more consistent awareness, where people know how we're doing it and why we're doing it. I think that right now that's special in this community, that what we're doing. Because, you see so many times when people say, oh, I saw this, and then they get dogged for it. We weren't there. We don't know. And so to be honorable and show integrity, we have to be consistent. And that's what 168 is bringing. And Jamie, I do have kind of a cold. And oh God, it's so exciting because a lot of people that come have their own notion, and yet we all, rally around what you're seeing, and based on how you're researched and how to play in this field with these guys. So, that's what intrigues me every time we have you on here. It's just to see what you're seeing different, or your new ideas, and where do you see us in 2 years doing this, or what's the outcome, or there's so many ifs and buts and candy and nuts that it makes for a possible exciting time.
I think that predictions are like dangerous where these guys are concerned.
And I do agree with that.
You know what I mean? But I can tell you that they're there in these areas that will be with the 168 crew in the future, and where we were in the past with them, and where I'm going every day or two, and I understand what they're doing to observe me, and so that gives me the advantage. We have applied this so far in everywhere we've been. In 168, we did the same thing. If you were listening on that first night, I gave a little presentation. And I told you I was going to be watching that tree line right over there. And I pointed at it. And that's where I'm going to be filming right there. I wasn't interested in hiking. I wasn't interested in any of that. Because when you understand the nature of how they actually exist in these particular areas in Florida, then you understand where you should be filming and what you should go through. And to me, it's like, I looked at the whole thing and it was like, okay, well, I'm going to try to validate more data, and I think they're going to be here. And so what we saw, and from what I'm hearing from, I think Christopher Noel might have picked up a little audio in that tree line. And if he did,
Yeah.
Kerry did, because Kerry's was there even longer than Christopher's and recorded more data. So I think that we have, with the track that the Lost Cryptid guys, Dave and Josh and Blake found, I think that, we have a pretty solid documentation of that entire, situation there in that tree line. And I look at that and it's like, we're going to take that same situation that exists, right? We left and some new people came in, and guess what? They weren't 168. They weren't Bigfoot researchers, and they were oblivious to the fact that the hominoids were watching them from the tree line. So they went right back to business as usual. I guarantee you they did that, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to go back and we're going to do the same thing. But this time, we'll have that updated drone with a camera we can control. I was talking to Kerry about it. So if these individuals choose to observe us from the trees, well, we have aerial weapons that we can deploy that this time we have a greater degree of control over. And I think that's going to come out in the footage. I do, because the one thing that hasn't changed, Bradley, in 6 years of this research is those creatures. They're the same every time we go there. They're incredibly hard to find. They're incredibly hard to see when you are in an area where they're at, because they're avoiding you. They're watching you, but they're avoiding your attention for sure. So,
have you ever thought about how many hours you have put in on a yearly basis doing what you do in observing, trying to catch, all the time you really have put into it? Have you ever tried to put pencil to paper and figure that out?
Yeah, we did like
Just out of
20,000
curiosity.
hours. 20,000 hours on crypto reality in the first 2.5 years.
Jeez.
Yeah. I mean, we're talking day and night to get to the point where we knew this is the area that we need to focus our research on. And then this is the area, you know what I mean? Like we found 2 or 3 really solid areas where we had encounters and tracks and that kind of stuff. And then we focused on it. And that was a while ago. That was 2017 when we did that time count. So
Real quick, welcome to new member David Wright. We thank you. Now, how this was 2000 and what when you figured out?
2016. We had 20,000 hours in the field and in making crypto reality films and in hiking and everything that went into bringing just the still images and what little video footage we were able to obtain, which, at that point, man, when you're around these individuals and you're in a fight or flight situation, it's very hard to operate anything other than your feet trying to run.
Right.
It's like, and in these situations, we managed to pull significant data. And we have the growls and we have the eyes and stuff, where we're in the bushes with these things and they're within 8 to 10 feet of us. You can see the pupils, the color of their eyeballs and the whites of their eyes in the bushes staring at us,
See, that's yeah. I mean, just all that time when you really think about how many hours, and we know how much you've been doing it as of late if you follow your channel. But what's even cooler is all the time that other people that come down for the 168 to, how they check the egos at the gate and come in, and everybody wants to learn and everybody wants to, be consistent on how we do this. And I got to say, Kerry has, done such a good job on, putting together the staff and the people that are going. And Mark, you've done such a good job in just leading us to these places. I mean, that's, those 20,000 hours, 40,000 hours, however many, from then to now that you put into it. I think that we're so fortunate, and I always like to say lucky, and Kerry always says, you create your own luck. In a lot of instances we do, But that's what makes November in the fall more exciting. Just because I don't know about you, but I always will think about things. Oh God, I wish I could have done this differently, or I wish I could have done this differently. So and other people that I talk to that won the trip are thinking the same thing. So by the way, welcome BF Bud. So I know that we've been on for 50 minutes, and you got to jump here in about 10 minutes. So if people want to put questions in all capitals, thank you, Livewire. He says something, and let me click on this. If it shows it, theory or opinion on the phenomenon of researchers named Mark that have captured some of the best footage. He's Mark Copeland talking about himself as well. I can appreciate that. Let's see. Let me get to you got to pat yourself on the back every once in a while, right?
Sounds good.
If we can find some. Okay, here we go. Tracy Lipford. If these creatures have human DNA, how do we get past evidence being labeled contaminated?
Well, when if you go off of the information that's available from Dr. Ketchum's study, what you'll hear is that if they test the mitochondrial DNA, it's typically going to come up human. But if they test the nuclear DNA, it should come up something else, and it shouldn't be identifiable.
Right.
Except as to compare it to the GenBank Homo sapiens cognatus sample that GenBank has for a type specimen comparison, which is unknown, and they're not sure what that one is. So it's unknown hominid. So there are type specimens to compare it to. And I think that there's a high likelihood that, what was her name? Could you put that up again?
Lord. It was
Michelle?
It was, hold on. Let me get back. It was Tracy Lipford.
Oh, okay. So Tracy, the way that they have to get around that is they have to go through extensive testing on the rest of the DNA. They have to go through the entire process of forensic examination and try to pull as much information out of it as they can, as opposed to testing it, having it come up with the mitochondrial DNA in the initial testing and have it come back human and then say, oh, it could have been contaminated. Because at that point, if you're submitting, you should have control samples. You should have a sample of the person who pulled the DNA sample itself from the field, right, as a comparison. So if they say it's contaminated, they can test it against that person's DNA. The chain of custody, every single person that handles it should submit a DNA sample as well for comparison so that they cannot say that it's contaminated. If they do say, we think it's contaminated because we got human DNA, further testing is necessary to conclusively say whether or not it's Sasquatch DNA. If it comes back Homo sapiens cognatus or unclassified hominoid and the mitochondrial is human, it's probably Sasquatch DNA.
Yeah, that's and that's one thing that's so interesting with all of that is handling of the DNA is the same way that we're handling the filming and the audio, keeping it as pure as possible, the chain of custody, what's it called, the metadata, where you can tell if it's been messed with or whatnot. Because I know that that's the quickest way to shut somebody up is if you show them where the metadata has not been screwed with. Now, one thing that I'm curious about, you guys are going to be going, you and Carrie are going to be going to Donnie Miller's up north of you to do some investigating. What do you think? I mean, because Donnie Miller's had a lot of crazy stuff happen at his place.
We'll see. We have to actually go there and see what's going on, man. I mean, anything could happen. It could be nothing. I don't know. I mean, I'm not talking about that he has nothing going on, but
right.
We might just hit it where it's they're off doing something else and they're not messing with him. So that's one of those things where when you get there, you find out.
Right. It's hard to predict. Whereas where we're going in Florida, I look at
it and I say, okay, well, we could do two different things, right? We could get there and act like typical researchers and bum rush in looking for tracks and hair and do all this other shit. and probably freak them out. Or we can lay back and let the natural occurrences that he's been complaining about continue to happen and try to document those things. And I think that's the strategy we're going to employ.
I think it's almost like a crapshoot.
Yeah.
From the sense of you only have a limited time and you don't know what you're going to get till you get it.
Yeah.
So that will be
we definitely want those individuals that are on that property going about business as usual. So it's in our best interest as researchers and as the documentarians going to investigate as investigators to try not to stir anything up and just see what happens first. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I know you touched on this a little earlier. When it's June, July, August, you're not going to get much in the daytime at all, are you? Because do you think that they're chilling out per se because it is so hot, or what is in your past when it's super hot? When do you like to go and do your research?
Yeah, one of my favorite times is when it's hot because it's actually pins them down in the areas that I actually don't mind being in, right? So it's 100 degrees out, but in the shade it's like 87. Right. So we're all just going to meet in there, and I'm going to have cameras, and they're going to have mud, and they're going to roll around in the bushes, and I'm going to have my cameras. And I look at it like if it's hot out, I'm going for the shade, and I'm looking for the mud and all that stuff. So like when you guys come in November, it's funny, but I really love researching in the daytime, man. I mean, not only is it a lot safer, but you can catch these guys off guard, man, like you wouldn't believe, because it's the time when they're resting, pretty much. You know what I mean?
And pretty much a lot of people don't go tramping out in the middle of the daytime, looking for them. And I saw another question pop up from old Jimmy Barr. Mark, have you ever seen one that almost stopped you from continuing your research?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, it almost never started. So, I mean, there's always that.
Really?
And yeah, in the end, I was just writing a blog, and I'd kind of like, once I saw the thing, I was like, man, I don't want anything to do with this shit. It's like this, and then it was like, I don't know. I couldn't let it go. I was kind of obsessing on it, but quietly. And then trying to think, is it possible for me to like show people one of these things? Cause they need to like see this, man, and so, yeah, it was one of those things where, if Melanie would not have found the 18-inch track that she found the day that I took her in the field, we probably wouldn't be, Crypto Reality would have took a different route, I think, because she was not into it. And I was just like, I didn't want to go into the area that I saw the Bigfoot. I was asking about that, man. I'm like, we're not going over that way, So we went on another area that was 2 to 3 miles from where I saw the Bigfoot, and she found a track, man, huge barefoot track, and I was like, God, man, what's going on?
I didn't realize that.
I started taking it like personally when she found that track. It was like weird, you know what I mean? I was like, I started thinking all kinds of stuff, like, why is this happening to me? You know what I mean? It was like, because it was continuing to happen. My son had an encounter. My brother found tracks, all in like a 3 to 4 year period. All of these things happened, and I had an encounter and all this stuff. And it just was like really, it was too much, so I almost stopped. And then, it's like, if it wasn't for her finding the track, we wouldn't have started. And then if it wasn't for her on at least 3 other occasions, I would have shut the whole thing down, because when it got dangerous was when we were, I was on them with that drone. When we first got the drone, it took me a while to find the area from above, and they like changed the area, and you could tell because the darkest spot was never consistent. And it's like, wait a minute, the canopy doesn't move. You know what I mean? Like the canopy's the canopy. So how is the dark spot always moving? Because they're moving their shit with them when they go. They have big, huge, woven together vines, and they pull stuff, that you wouldn't believe, man. And they just move it where they're at, and they put it over their heads, and they cover themselves up on the top of the saw palmettos, and they lay in there. Well, I got the drone too close, and one of them got up off the ground and ran at us in the bush and was parting the trees, and big, tall trees, and they were moving.
When you were on the ground with the drone, he knew where you were?
Oh, absolutely.
It,
Well, they knew it was us. I'd flown a drone on
right.
them times. They watched me fly it out of Melanie's hands 50 times, probably.
Oh, so you really
And they knew I was
twisted
flying
one
that
off.
drone. Excuse me?
I said you really twisted him off if he got up and went
Oh,
at
he
you.
was pissed, man. And the trees were like swaying, man, as he was coming through.
Holy shit!
And I was in the bushes because you can't see the drone iPad screen to fly the drone in direct sunlight.
Right.
So I was in the bushes where he was busting through, coming at me. And Melanie grabbed my shirt and pulled me out of the bushes. And when I heard what was going on, I pushed the throttle on the drone, and it went like 500 feet in the air. And as the sound faded, he stopped. And then we heard him turn around, and he shoved a tree as he went by. This one tree, like as he turned around, and we were just in like, basically scared to death. I mean, I ain't gonna lie to you, man. I was freaking out, man. I got camera footage of like right after the incident, and my hands are shaking. I'm stuttering and shit. And I just want to leave. You know what I mean? And they'll do that shit every once in a while. If he's trying to sleep and you're in there flying a fucking drone on him, really, bro? You know what I mean? So like, I'm like, in hindsight, it's like, this is his house, man. He lives there and his family is in there. And it's like, as people will hear that from my mouth and laugh, what you need to understand is, like I said, and I'll end with this: in your backyard is a drama being played out right now that you are completely 100% oblivious to, because you don't take the time to look, and that's all there is. You know what I mean?
No, and I mean that's you're right, and it brings up a lot of stuff that we tend to overlook, but it's the details, the details of like what you're describing just adds to, between now and when we go next time, it's going to be so tightened up. And thanks, Greg, for covering that one for Mark. That's
yeah. My swear words now.
And everybody needs to understand this has been we went over an hour without one, so that's pretty good. I mean, that's good. But the thing that makes it so exciting for the next 168 is just how every week, and when we all talk, how it's just getting tighter and tighter and tighter. Plus, we know what to expect now from people that are coming back. We know what they do well, so we can put people and utilize them to their best of their ability. So I think it's going to be a huge difference from what we just did to what's coming up, even though I think what we just did is going to be it's just going to change the landscaping of how this stuff is presented. So that's pretty exciting. But I guess since I know I got to let you go, Mark, you got a last word?
I mean, if I could say anything to you, if you're just getting into the subject and you really want to know what's going on, it's really important for you to keep an open mind, because there's a lot of information out there. And I always say the same thing. There's a lot that goes on right under your nose that you're blissfully unaware of, and I can tell you, it doesn't matter how big it is. And just because people say, you'll hear this from time to time, oh, something that big can how could something that big stay off people's radar? Well, it's not. We've been telling you for I don't know how long. Eyewitnesses have been coming forward since men have walked on this continent.
Right, you see it in the Native Americans, the drawings,
and in the same exact places. So this has been going on. What I can tell you is at one point in my life, I became aware of this, and I saw this, and that's when everything changed. And I can tell you that if you're interested in learning about it, Bigfoot Odyssey, Crypto Reality, and there's a lot of really good researchers around the country that aren't even involved in 168, but also the researchers of 168. The films are coming out. Get with those guys, get with us, because we're doing it. We're doing something about this. We're not just talking about it.
And awareness in a lot of different ways is a perfect word for what we're trying to bring, but also, I got and like what Kerry talked about, and this is what I'll end it with, what Kerry talked about with his encounter, he got so used to his surroundings that if he heard something that was odd, he would just, oh, that could be a buck, or that could be this, or that could be that. And awareness is going to be the key to just things happening with this subject. You know, the more and more people get aware, the more and more people are going to demand to know what's really going on. And then, you know, we'll probably be too old, but, you know, who knows? We'll have a lot of fun making it happen. But anyway, just want to thank everybody in the chat. Want to thank Mark Zaskey for giving us his hour tonight, and check his channel, Crypto Reality, on Patreon. It's highly worth the. How much is it again, Mark? What?
$1.99.
Yeah, $2, and it's great content. And I personally, from not being a researcher, learned a ton, and it made me realize I have so much more to learn. So thank you very much for that. And I don't know if we'll have something on Sunday, but obviously on Wednesday, there's always a researchers report with Carrie and Danielle. And by the way, in case I know Carrie was in the chat, he's working right now in West Texas again. So with that being said and done, thank you again, Mark, and thank you everybody for watching, and we'll see you down the road.
Thanks for having me, guys.
All right.
Thanks for your questions.
Night.
We'll see you next time, guys.
You got it. Night.